Welcome to Off Air with Christy Capel. I am joined by one of my personal friends who has the most amazing story and testimony today. And this is Mike Swiger. He's with True Freedom Ministries. And I've known Mike for many years. So here's the connection. First off is Mike's in-laws own Patterson Fruit Farm. So if you are local and are listening, you know what that is. If you're listening like across the country, it is the best pumpkin patch fruit farm. What would you say, Mike? The rides? Don't they have the rides?
They refer to it as agri-entertainment.
There you go.
Yeah, there's a whole fun fest, the fall fest for the children. It's a lot of fun. There's hay rides and corn mazes and pick your own apples.
Yes, the corn mazes and the apple cider and the donuts are
amazing,
the best. And so I had who's now 4-year-old, I had her first birthday party at the barn that you can rent for a wedding reception. And I'm pretty sure her birthday looked like a wedding reception. And then years before that, my first, who just turned 12, I took her pictures when she was like 9 months old on the farm. So I've known Mike for a long time, and this is going to be a great episode. Mike founded True Freedom Ministries, an evangelical nonprofit organization dedicated to reaching people locked in jails and prisons, the homeless, and those trapped in addiction across Ohio with the message of the true freedom found only in Jesus Christ. This after serving 17 years in prison. So Mike, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Mike, I wanted him to kind of share his testimony, and he has done so many amazing things in Northeast Ohio and just really across the country with where your story reaches, but definitely in the prisons here. And so I'm going to have Mike kind of share his story. This all started for you, I think. Were you in high school at the time?
I was in college.
You were in college?
Yeah, that's how I came to Cleveland. I attended Case Western. I came to Cleveland in 1986. My older brother was in law school back in the late 80s, and he got into a fight with his college roommate, and he beat him to death. And he called me, and I helped move the body and lie to the police. And ultimately, I was charged as an accomplice, and I was arrested in 1989. And I ended up in the county jail as an atheist, having never heard the gospel, and they were passing out free candy bars in the chapel.
Everybody loves a good candy bar.
I did not want to go to church, but I wanted a candy bar, and I was utterly offended by the gospel. I was told I was a sinner and I was going to hell, which I didn't believe. And I decided I'm going to find this story in the woman in the well this guy was talking about in the Bible and go back and make a fool out of him the next week. So I was reading through the New Testament, and by the time I got to John 4, I was totally crushed. I found that I was a sinner, I was going to hell, and I didn't know what to do about it. So I went back the following week, and he presented the gospel in the most persuasive way. There was a wooden cross back in the corner of the chapel, and he said, picture your indictment nailed above his head, because that's what was above his head. And he was paying the penalty for your sins. Well, my indictment said the state of Ohio was trying to execute me. And that made a very profound verbal imagery for me, because he died on the cross to take my penalty. That night, I surrendered my life to Jesus Christ, and that was November 1989, and I had a radical conversion. God took the anger from me, took a very foul mouth from me, and he started bringing godly men into my life who built into my life over the course of the next, really, 17 years. So I was ultimately sentenced to 21 to 50 years in prison for my role. I ended up at Lorraine Correctional, where I became the clerk in the warden's office, and God brought godly men to disciple me. So it was a tremendous opportunity to grow in a very hostile environment.
Yeah. And going back, you had a charmed life, right?
I did.
You talk, I love how you love your grandmas. They were such a big part of your life growing up. What was life like before all of this happened?
Yeah, I did have a charmed life.
Yeah.
I grew up in a small town. Both my grandparents lived on our street, so I saw my grandparents every day of my life. Everything I attempted, I succeeded at. I was the class president, I was a prom king, I was captain of the football team, captain of the track team. So whatever I put my hand to, I succeeded. Yeah. So when I went through a series of tragedies, I blew my knee out playing football, had to have multiple surgeries that ended my athletic career, and then in a very short span of 6 months, my mother was diagnosed with cancer. Both my grandmothers died. So all of a sudden, from going from this charmed life, everything went wrong.
Yeah.
Everything went wrong.
You said you kept coming home from college and something had happened.
Right. I came home once. My mom wasn't there. She's getting treatment for cancer that no one told me. They didn't want me to be upset about it and not focus on school. So I came home. I was holding my grandmother's hand when she died. And every time a tragedy happened, I just assumed God hated me, so I hated him back.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize how far I'd fallen.
And so after this situation happened, explain kind of how you got to that point where you were charged with this.
Yeah.
So your brother and yourself, you were very close growing up?
We were very close. He's my older brother.
Yeah.
So the night I was arrested, they took me to the police station, and the detective came in and with a file, and he said, I'm going to give you 30 seconds to make the most important decision of your life. You can be a witness for us, and we'll give you immunity right now. You can walk out right now. Or you could be a co-defendant with your brother. It's up to you. And he said, you might as well save yourself. Your brother already confessed. Well, I assumed he was lying to me because I didn't think my brother would confess. So I said, I'm not saying anything. So I was charged with aggravated murder, 2 counts of aggravated murder with death specifications. So it's a devastating, for a 19-year-old kid, a devastating day. I got locked in a jail cell for the first time, and I prayed a simple prayer. I said, God, if you even exist, let me die in my sleep tonight, because I don't want to go through this. My father was a county commissioner, so we made big news, national news with the case.
I heard there was even a movie based off of your case.
It's called Murder in a College Town. So going through the criminal justice system in a really high-profile light is not the way you want to do it.
So after that, have you talked to your brother?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
So the prison system has allowed me to minister in this prison and visit him. So I talk to him regularly. I do the first Sunday service at his prison every month. So we have a very good relationship.
Yeah. And so you go on. So you were released from jail, 17 years
17.
later?
My case was overturned.
Okay.
In 2006. I came home in 2006.
And during this time, I love your wife. I've met her so many times, and boy, she is just full of grace, isn't she? She is.
She is. I was engaged when I was arrested.
Yes, right.
And in fact, I was arrested a month and a half before our wedding day.
Wow.
And the night I was arrested, she was addressing our wedding invitations.
Oh my gosh.
And she waited for me for 17 years. Hundreds and hundreds of phone calls, thousands of letters. And when I came home, I told her, I have to ask your father's blessing to marry me or marry you. And if he doesn't give us his blessing, we can't get married. And the Bible says, honor your father and mother. And so when I came home, we did just that. And God
What was that conversation like, Mike?
It's awkward, as you can imagine. As you know, they have a fruit farm, and they're making maple syrup that day, and people are coming and going. And next thing I know, I'm in this room with her dad and her 2 brothers and nobody else. And I'm thinking, how'd that happen? I spent 17 years making sure this did not happen.
Oh my God, that's nerve-wracking. But ended up.
Yeah, he gave me his blessing.
Yeah.
We were married in July. He paid for the wedding, paid for our honeymoon, and he and I are best friends today.
Did you have your reception at Patterson?
We did not. We had our engagement party there, and we had our rehearsal dinner there, but we did not.
Yeah, and so I would say, and you have said, God is sovereign in all situations, and hearing his story and where you've been and what you're doing now, explain that to our listeners. Like, God truly has, you speak of grace with your wife.
Yeah.
God's grace is unbelievable.
Yeah, I always say, I never questioned her faithfulness, I only questioned her judgment for waiting for me. And when I was going through that time, and 17 years in prison is a difficult thing, and I didn't know what God was doing at the time, preparing me for what I'm doing now. For instance, the chapel I worked in for years, we only got 1 magazine a month. It was called The War Cry, Salvation Army's War Cry magazine. And a volunteer had come in who just came back from Israel, and he said, I stood in Barabbas' cell. And that never occurred to me that Barabbas was in prison, but he had to be. So I read through the Gospels of what would Barabbas hear and see from his cell. And all he could hear was the crowd, He couldn't see Pilate. He couldn't see Jesus. He could only hear, Barabbas, Barabbas, crucify him. So I thought, that's pretty cool. So I wrote a short story as a crucifixion told through the eyes of Barabbas. And I sent it to the only magazine we had at our chapel, The War Cry, and they bought my story.
Wow.
$300. And every month the magazine would come, and they never published it. So I got out of prison 2006. I'm looking for jobs here in Cleveland. And the war cry, or the Salvation Army on 22nd Street had a job opening for someone in the IT department, scrapping computers and evaluating computers. I thought, well, I could do that. So I go down there and I fill out the job application, and it says, have you ever been convicted of a felony? Check yes or no. So I check yes. Then it says, please explain. And they give you a line that's like 3 inches long. I went, I have a story to tell. So I said, I will explain during the interview. So I go in. And I handed my application to the security guard. He's like staring at me, and he's looking at this felony box and staring at me. And I don't want to have a staring contest with the guy. So I pick up the War Cry magazine, the Easter 2006 War Cry magazine. I'm flipping through it. I get to the center story. It's my story. I wrote it in prison 7 years earlier. It was published the week of my interview. So I take the magazine, I put it in my file. I thought, wow, God got here before I did.
Wow.
So I go in, and the lady's grilling me. How'd you get a college degree in prison? You have a copy of your transcript? So I gave it to her. And how'd you get Microsoft certified in prison? I gave her a certificate. And on my resume, I put down I was a published author. And she goes, yeah, right. Do you have any samples of anything you've written? So I pulled out the magazine and said, I am the feature story in your international magazine this month. And I handed it to her.
Mike, that's...
And they gave me the job.
Wow. Boy, you're not kidding. God showed up before you did. That's wild.
Yeah, so things I was learning when I was in prison, I didn't know.
Sure.
God was using and preparing me to do what I'm doing now.
Mm-hmm. And I think that a lot of people listening can relate to that in life. Maybe you didn't serve time in prison, but all these years later, you realize why you're in a certain place at a certain time, and maybe you wanted to be out of that certain place, but God keeps you in that certain place, and then you realize, now I know what that is for.
You learn the why later.
Yes, you do, but you just have to be faithful.
While you're in the midst of the storm.
Yeah. And so while you were in prison, was there a time you thought, you know what, I think I'm going to get into prison ministry, or how did that start?
Yeah, the answer is no. My plan was to never go back to prison when I got out. I was never going to share my story with anybody. I was very ashamed of what I had done. And when I got out, I'd been in prison for so long, I thought, well, no one's going to know who I am or what I did. And I was reading this book called The Purpose-Driven Life, the year before I got out of prison. And there's a chapter in it that says the thing that you're most ashamed of that you don't want anybody to know, that is your springboard to ministry. So I felt convicted. And I said, okay, Lord, if this is what you want, if you open the door, I'll do that. So when I got out of prison, I got recruited to do prison ministry at the Gospel House Church. Mm-hmm. And I got hired, and I said, the problem is I'm not allowed to go back to prison by law for 5 more years. I can't really do what you're hiring me to do. But the pastor said, hey, we believe God's called you. He'll make a way for you. So I started November 2006. And the person who I'd worked for, I was a clerk in the warden's office for my entire time, was the director of the whole prison system. And there was a reentry conference in Cleveland at Windows on the River, and he was speaking, and I physically bumped into him in the food line. He goes, Swiger, what are you doing here? And I said, I just got hired to do prison ministry, but I'm not allowed to go to prison by law. And he said, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to write a letter tomorrow to every warden in the state of Ohio that says they have my personal permission to allow you in their facilities. And he did. Wow. I got a phone call 2 days later from the warden at Richland Correctional. Said, I worked for him for 7 years as his clerk. And he said, Swiger, come down here tomorrow. I'm going to train you myself. And he did. And I preached at prison that month. And then over the next 5 years, I preached in every prison in Ohio, including on death row, while I was on parole.
Wow.
Because God has a plan.
Yes, God, and he will open any door.
He will.
That you don't think is going to happen, isn't it?
That I didn't want to walk through.
That you don't want to walk through. That's so true. But as you continued to do prison ministry, still things were happening in your life. Your wife ended up with breast cancer.
Yeah, it's not all rainbows and pots of gold.
Yeah, when you're following Jesus, right?
Yeah, it's a struggle. So we got married in 2006, and my son was born in 2007. And then 2 years later, my wife was pregnant again. And while she was 8 months pregnant, she was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer. And they had to induce her to begin treatment right away because she had a very aggressive form of cancer. And when my daughter was born, she was born with a host of medical complications. Couldn't breathe, her esophagus wouldn't stay open, ended up in the NICU for 3 months, multiple procedures and surgeries. While my wife was going through breast cancer treatment, And at one point, after her first chemo, she went neutropenic. So I had my wife and my daughter in 2 separate intensive care units at the same time with a 2-year-old at home while doing ministry. And the body of Christ really came around us. I had to, because my daughter's, one of her problems, she had to be held upright while she was being tube fed in the intensive care unit. And we had 18 couples from our church volunteer to come down and hold my daughter while she had fed, so I could take my wife to chemotherapy and surgery and stuff. So we were blessed. And God taught us during the times, those years in prison when it was very difficult, there was no light at the end of the tunnel, to trust Him. Yeah. So going through that season of our lives, we knew we could trust Him. And my wife's cancer-free now, 15 years later. My daughter's healthy, and here we are.
Yes, and his son's playing football, and life is good. Even though going through all those trials, as you say, God is still, working. And when you were in prison, did you write all of your books? You said you were an author. Is this something you did to kind of pass the time, or? It
started off as just the way to pass the time. I had a typewriter. There's no computers in prison, and I read a lot. So I thought, well, I want to write a John Grisham style legal thriller that shared the gospel.
Interesting.
Use it as a witnessing tool. So I plotted out this story, and I wrote it on a typewriter. I sent it off to an agent, and she said, I got a letter back. Great plot. Terrible writing. It's as if you have no training whatsoever.
Thank you, lady.
Which was true. I didn't take any writing courses, so I started reading books on how to write.
Okay.
And I rewrote it, sent it to the Multnomah Press, and they said, great plot, terrible writing, read these books. So I had to rewrite it from scratch on a typewriter 6 times. But I was ultimately offered a 2-book deal, and my first book came out in the year 2000. It's actually this one.
Yeah, which one? Okay.
It's called A Trial of Innocence. It's a pro-life Christian murder mystery legal thriller about 2 brothers involved in a case, and one wouldn't testify against the other because they say, write what you know, right? So this book was re-released in 2020, and it's been on Amazon's bestseller list for the last 2 years.
Are you serious?
Under the religious fiction category. So it's found new life.
Yeah.
And then, so I wrote that.
So grab that on Amazon, right?
It's on Amazon or any online retailer.
Yeah.
And then I wrote 3 more books set in Cleveland. Yeah, mostly pro-life. I have one that's not. It's more of a political thriller. And it was a way for me to use the gifts God had given me and really pass the time. I never had a television. I just read, I wrote, listened to the radio. So that time in prison was a time of growth for me, and the skills I learned, I use today. I still write. I wrote this little booklet for the Daily Bread. Free to anybody who requests one from our Daily Bread.
Really?
I wrote another little booklet for them called How Can I Be Saved? So God used the things I learned in a very dark place in a much different category now.
Isn't that, I feel like, where God kind of shows Himself to us in those dark places?
Yeah.
I mean, do you feel like that?
I do. I look back now, it doesn't even seem real.
Yeah.
17 years is a half my adult life. But I look back at that time fondly now because I see it was equipping me to do what I do now. Mm-hmm. I go back to those same prisons today. And, our ministry has grown rapidly over the last 12 years. And we have our own dormitories now that we run in prisons I used to be in. It doesn't even make sense to me what God does.
It's crazy. I was reading 78,000 are in Ohio prisons.
Prisons and jails, yep.
Prisons and jails, 21,000 released every year. There is a mission, True Freedom Ministries, which is what I had mentioned at the beginning of this podcast that I believe you started, Mike.
Yeah.
So how did you say, okay, this is what we're going to do?
Yeah, well, I was on staff at a church, and I was the executive pastor, and which is a very rewarding job.
Yeah.
And I was offered to be the next senior pastor at that facility. And then through a bunch of circumstances, the Lord really put me in a position where my wife said to me, do you really think God had us go through everything we went through so you could be the pastor of a soft suburban church? You need to go to prison. Mm-hmm. So Gary Coley and I left the Gospel House and started True Freedom in March of 2012. And it really was amazing what God's done. We've grown exponentially year after year. We have 19 employees now. We have 150 volunteers. We do over 200 classes, services, and programs every month in the prison system.
Wow.
So, and we brought a lot of innovation through the relationships I was able to establish while I was in prison. People who I was their clerk, I used to empty their garbage and deliver their mail, became the directors of prison systems around the country who know me personally, who allow us to come in and bring innovative programmings. So I look back now and see, well, that's why I was that guy's clerk, and that's why I had to do 3 more years after that appeal was denied. And you go through all these, it's a tapestry that we see the back of until down the road you see the front. Oh, that's what you were doing all the time.
Yep, that's what you were doing all the time. I was reading about True Freedom Ministries and just all the amount of things that you guys do, to once they get released, they are prepared to get back into society. A couple of them, one of them rocked the yard, which is very important for reentry. So that seems like a fun
It was very fun.
Event that went on for years, right?
It did. It grew organically. So we do a lot of sporting events in prison.
Yes.
So we'll do a cookout for the entire facility. 2,000 hamburgers, 2,000 hot dogs. And I showed that at a banquet once. So one of my donors said, if I give you $10,000, will you turn those hamburgers into steak and have a steak roast for the entire prison? So we did. We had a softball event, steaks for 2,000 people. And I was showing that at a banquet, and another donor said, hey, I want to do that. Can you do like a dinner for 250 guys? I said, sure. So we arrange it. His name is Steve Mintz. And afterwards he called me and said, my son's on a record label in Nashville. If I can get them to bring up a recording artist in his band, can you arrange a concert? I said, we'll try, right? So we do. They bring up their artist, and it was well received. Steak roast and a concert. It was the first time the Mintz family had ever been in prison, and they were so touched by the impact it had on the men. Damon Mintz called that week and said, hey, we want to do more of this. Can you arrange a concert series all across Ohio? So we did. They paid for everything. They paid for the band. They paid for the food. They paid for the publicity. So we did 9 concerts all across the state of Ohio. We had over 4,000 people attend.
Wow.
Over 400 make a first-time profession of faith. And it was a cookout, a concert, and a crusade.
Nice. You've also had baptisms, though, too.
Yeah, we do baptism service. We just did a service in Stark Correctional, It's a regional facility. We did 112 baptisms one day from people who gotten saved through our ministry while we were there.
Yes.
So we're seeing a revival take place behind bars.
Isn't that amazing?
I get goosebumps thinking about it.
I know, I do too, when you tell these stories. The motherhood program is another one, which is very important.
Yeah, there's women in prison have almost universally been abused. They've been traumatized, been trafficked. So we bring the gospel, but we also want to bring healing to people who've gone through torturous lives. The rate of women who had abortions in prison is over 80%. So we have an abortion recovery program we do for the women who've gone through that. The motherhood program, we just did a family reintegration event at the women's prison where we brought their children in and spent a day with them.
Gosh.
It was a way for the moms to apologize to their children for abandoning them through incarceration and then bring healing and forgiveness.
Wow. That's amazing. Also, the entrepreneurship program, which really teaches people business once they do get out and find work.
Yeah, a lot of guys everybody in prison has an idea for a business.
Oh, of course.
They have no idea what it takes to do it.
Right.
We partnered with John Carroll.
I think everybody thinks that they have.
Yeah,
right?
They can do something. So John Carroll partnered with us to bring students who are senior year in business school to teach the guys basic business principles. So the students get college credit, the guys get a business plan, and then at the end they do a 3-minute Shark Tank presentation.
Oh, that's neat.
The panel. So we bring entrepreneurship in. We actually take guys and women out of prison every day in a work release program. Over 50 individuals every day. We take them out of prison in our vans. They have work in civilian clothes in the community. Then we take them back to prison at the end of the night. We have ladies working at the Marble Room, at Il Venetian, at Law Keepers. We have men working at Lorain County at a company called Woodpeckers. They're allowed to make real wages. Mm-hmm. We have a guy getting out next month who will have saved $38,000 working over the last 3 years while he's still in prison. Yeah.
And I think that is probably hard, right? Once they get out, nobody knows where to go, how to get a job. And then sometimes they end right back in.
Well, you can't. People don't realize you can't get an apartment if you don't have a credit report or you don't have any income, right? Mm-hmm. So when you get out of prison, you have a 0 on your credit report, you have a felony conviction, and no income. How do you get an apartment? Mm-hmm. You can't. Well, now our folks, when they get out of prison, they can pay their first and last month rent. They have a credit report. They have an income that's verifiable. And the connection between employment and recidivism is directly connected. Recidivism rate by which people go back to prison within 3 years. If you don't get a job, you go back to prison. If you have a job, you don't go back to prison.
Right. That's true. Mm-hmm. The juvenile justice system as well has been really open to hearing about Jesus, just as much as the others. And what has been the reaction from them? You know, at such a young age, are they receptive?
They are. We're very active. There's 3 prisons, juvenile prisons in Ohio. We're in all of them, and we do work at Quincy, which is a juvenile detention center in Cleveland. They are receptive, but the youth today are angry. Yeah. They've been abandoned. They're not being even raised by, sometimes they're not being raised by their mothers even, or their grandmothers. It's like a neighbor or someone who knew someone. So they have this fear, this utter rejection, anger towards the world. They get involved in the gangs, violence, drugs early. I mean, I've seen a kid 8 years old in jail. 8 years old in a prison cell. It's heartbreaking. They need hope, and they are receptive to Jesus Christ. Kids are tougher because they don't trust anybody. Adults don't follow through on their words, so we build up relationships first, and we bring in fun activities too. But it comes down to got to change your heart through Jesus Christ, and then give tools to deal with your life. Yeah.
Is it hard to get the message of Jesus for those who are in prison? I mean, how do you even begin? How do you go in and speak all the time? Like you just don't blink an eye. For the rest of us, it's like, how are we going to get to their heart, right?
Well, preaching in prison is different than preaching on the street because you don't have to overcome the sinner barrier. You know, people on this side of the fence, it's hard to convince someone they're a sinner in need of a savior, right? In prison, you don't have to convince them of that. They have a piece of paper called an indictment that tells them they're a sinner. The hardest part is getting people to believe they can be forgiven. Mm-hmm. Guys will say, you don't know what I've done. God can't forgive me. And he can. So it's a different dynamic. We do have a big reception in prison, guys, because a lot of our volunteers are ex-offenders who've gotten out. Their lives are changed. They're married. They have jobs. They have kids. They give back. So when we come in with this group of people whose lives have been changed by Christ, it gives them hope. Because what they're thinking is, if he could do it for you, he could do it for me.
Exactly. What do you see with True Freedom Ministries? What do you want to see for the future? I'm sure you get asked that a lot.
I do. Our goal is to blanket Ohio. Yeah. There's 30 prisons in Ohio. We want to be in every prison every week doing evangelism, discipleship, mentorship, pre-release training. Right now, we're in like 9 of those prisons every week. We're in all of them a couple times a year, but we want to be in all of them. So we want to have another location in the Columbus area, so we can do the same thing in those 9 or 10 prisons, and then again another one in Cincinnati. That would allow us to blanket the state. Then once we blanketed the state, we would then go to other states. Yeah. I get invited to speak all over the place, which I usually say no, because our mission field's Ohio, and we haven't reached our mission field yet.
Yeah. I think you guys have done such a wonderful job. Aunt Peggy has worked with you. My Aunt Peggy. And she's been in prison ministry for so many years. And you guys you're just special people. I think it takes, those special people like you guys that I know in my life. But there's always opportunities for volunteers. Yeah. How does a person, if they're listening, go, you know what? I think I probably could help out True Freedom Ministries in some shape or form.
Yeah, our biggest needs for volunteers.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be an ex-offender. You don't have to be a former drug addict. You don't have to have tattoos to be effective in prison ministry. Yeah, 90% of prison ministry is showing up. And we have people who are former teachers, former principals, business people, homemakers, who have gifts. Yeah. They're an encourager. They want to be a teacher. They can be a small group facilitator. They can provide food. Whatever it is that you love to do, we could use that in prison. Yeah. So they can call our office. Our phone number is 216-202-3636. Go to our website. We have a volunteer training coming up in 2 weeks for new volunteers. Get involved.
Yeah, you can donate too.
You can donate. We are 100% privately funded. We don't take government money.
Yeah.
We are always looking for donors, of course.
Yeah. And I'll put the link to the website for True Freedom Ministries for people who can join, and your books as well. Cool. Those will all be listed there as well. But what do you hope, as we wrap this up, for people to take away from, your and I's discussion about going into prisons and preaching the Word of God?
Yeah, people in prison are not like you see on TV.
Yeah.
The movies and TVs do a disservice to the men and women in prison. Very few are those hardened criminals who can't be rehabilitated. Like 95% are your next door neighbors. How 50% of prison population gets released every year, coming back to the communities. These are people who committed a sin, made a mistake, who had a rough go at it to begin with, who need Jesus Christ, and they need a good church to come home to. So what I hope is two things. I want to see that the community's view of people incarcerated to change.
How can we do that?
Yeah, we have a punitive view.
Yeah.
Lock them up, throw away the key. I don't want to see that person again. All life has value. Every soul has infinite value. Christ died for the soul in prison like he did for the person in Parkside Church. Those are brothers and sisters in Christ who need the church to come around and support them. So I'd like to change the idea, get away from the punitive view and get to a more restorative justice where we are enabling people to make up for what they did in the past. I mean, we commit a crime, you should do the time. But while you're there, the punishment is being there. It's not to be tortured while you are there. So while they're there, society and the church should be building into these lives, restoring the broken hearts and broken souls in horrible case studies of the lives these people have endured. 90% of people in prison don't have a dad, never met him. How do you become a good dad if you never had a dad? So we do mentorship on how to be a dad. But change the view that these are valuable people who have a lot to contribute. All we need to do is love them and restore them.
Right. And those of you listening and want to be a part of it, you just got to love everybody, right?
We're called to.
Humans, we are called to love everyone. So this has been an amazing discussion. If you want to check out more, again, True Freedom Ministries, I'll put it on there. Mike, it is so nice to see you.
Nice to see you again, yeah.
Mike and I have seen each other in passing in different situations with your banquets and what have you. But I thought, gosh, you got to come in here and share your testimony. And there's just so many ways that those who are Christians and say they are can reach out and volunteer. And I know people are looking for those kinds of things all the time. Yeah. So
volunteers changed my life.
Yeah. Oh, I bet. Just anybody talking. There's people that have changed my life just by sharing something personal or just speaking knowledge or anything like into my life. Right. I think us as humans, we're receptive to that.
Yeah.
So if you see that somebody cares about you or your situation, right? It makes all the difference. Yeah. All right, Mike, good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
Thank you all so much. Again, I will link everything. You got to check out his books because those are interesting, right?
Thank you.
I'll put them all on there too. All right, we'll see you guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you.